When I first started exploring low carb, I tried to keep it very quiet because it has been, and maybe still is, a very controversial subject. In other countries, dietitians were losing their licensure over practicing low carb, let alone medical doctors as well.
Professor Noakes, on a charge of unprofessional conduct, the majority of this committee find you not guilty.
The controversy over low carb may be slowly, quietly changing. In the long drawn-out case of Dr. Tim Noakes, the final ruling found in his favor.
So as far as we're concerned, we've made the point that this diet is safe. That's all we really set out to do.
The low-carb ketogenic diet is a low-inflammation diet.
More and more brave practitioners are going against the dietary guidelines to help their patients find better health. Like Brian Lenskis, who also teaches low-carb nutrition classes at his church. So far, Brian's congregation has lost more than 2,000 pounds.
Our results are in purple here, low carb.
The 2-year findings from Sarah Hallberg's clinical trial show that a low-carb, high-fat diet is equally as effective as bariatric surgery in reversing type 2 diabetes.
So your assessment of the vilification of saturated fat after your experience in this trial?
Well, I'll tell you, what we say is that we do not restrict saturated fat in these patients, and yet they're having these remarkable results.
In April of 2019, the American Diabetes Association issued an update to its long-standing position that diets lower than 130 grams of carbs a day are unsafe.
I was thrilled. It felt like Christmas morning to me. It was the very first time in writing from a huge organization that said what I was doing was okay. What I was doing was an approach that was helping my patients. And while it was something that I have known for years, it was the first time I felt safe. It was the first time I felt safe to give these recommendations.
In 2015, after more than 50 years of condemning foods like eggs, lobster, and shrimp, the American Heart Association quietly dropped their long-standing recommendation against dietary cholesterol, saying it's no longer a nutrient of concern. That same year, the U.S. Dietary Guidelines Committee removed the cap on dietary fat consumption, admitting there's no evidence that eating fat is bad for health. But the cap on saturated fat remains.
The hypothesis that saturated fats are bad for health has been the most tested hypothesis in the history of nutrition science. There has been no hypothesis that has been more tested. Some 75,000 people, 65,000, somewhere in that range, depending on which studies you include, and none of them could show that saturated fats had any effect on total or cardiovascular mortality. There's no evidence for it.
Even so, the American Heart Association, who takes much of its funding from big food and big pharma, continues to stand behind its long-held position that saturated fats are the cause of heart disease and that refined vegetable oils are heart healthy.
But there is so much politics and so much money and big pharma and the sugar industry behind trying to keep those guidelines as they are right now. I feel like eventually they will change, but when? It could be 50 years. We can't wait 50 years. Millions of people have died already because of this mess.
Doug Reynolds isn't waiting any longer. His company, Low Carb USA, is partnering with dozens of physicians, nutritionists, and dietitians to create a set of global clinical guidelines that teach medical professionals how to safely and effectively practice low-carb nutrition.
That gives a lot of them confidence to maybe start implementing it in their practice, where before they weren't quite sure how to do it, or they were afraid that the other doctors weren't doing it. Now they're actually following some kind of set of guidelines.
And what about the official dietary guidelines for Americans? The 3 main eating patterns recommended by the USDA all feature more than 50% of daily calories as carbohydrates. According to the dietary guidelines, low carbohydrate, high fat diets are still not an option.
So good.
In 2017, the National Academy of Sciences and Medicine performed the first ever outside scientific review of the U.S. dietary guidelines and found that the process lacked transparency and scientific rigor. Recommending a single dietary pattern to an entire population was a huge mistake. Not only did the low-fat diet not work, it did us harm. and resulted in greater obesity and disease. The lesson of the low-fat diet may be that nutrition science is deeply flawed, and our nation's dietary guidelines have been heavily influenced by the food industry and the enormous amount of money at stake.
What we are living now is just so completely unsustainable. These unsustainable rates of obesity and diabetes were bankrupting our nation. It's destroying people's lives, it's destroying our country, and it has to stop.
We are not treating the disease, we're treating the symptoms of the disease. And so it should be of no surprise to anyone that we're not getting better. And we're not going to get better until we recognize what the real problem is. If we changed the food, we could solve this problem.
You know, we get so many mixed messages about diet, and
does the government have a role in telling people how to eat?
we kind of have to find what really works for us, but we still need to know the truth.
Fascinating question that has a lot of different opinions. And certainly the past 30, 40 years of experience would say, no, they probably shouldn't be in that role.
The people at the top are not going to change. So we have to get this going as a bottom-up revolution and get more and more people on board until they're shamed into changing their guidelines because the swell of the population is just ignoring them.
The change is coming from the people because they've changed. They are forcing the doctors to change. If we can change the medical profession, I think we'll do something.
If you're pre-diabetic or type 2 diabetic, there is a way out. A path forward to health and vitality, to fewer drugs and more energy. You can get your life back, and all you have to do is eat real food.
If somebody has type 2 diabetes, they can go online right now. They can watch your movie, they can read up on something, they can buy a book, and start reversing their disease today.
What I see on a day-to-day basis with my individual patients, as well as my own family and my own friends, I think it's missed in some of this research. And what that is freedom. It's freedom from being hangry, right? It's freedom from cravings. It's freedom from headaches. It's freedom from reactive hypoglycemia. It's freedom from mood swings. It's better quality of sleep. It's better quality of life.
I feel great. I feel really good.
Hi, girl.